Hello and welcome to IAMC Radio and Podcast. Today, we're going to be exploring some top news headlines from March 29th.
Okay.
And as always, we're going to be standing on the side of truth and justice as we bring these to you.
Sounds good.
Okay, so let's jump right in. We're going to start with Nigeria. And there are some really concerning reports of deaths in police custody.
Yes, very troubling. There are two separate incidents that really warrant our attention today.
Yeah, let's start with the first one. This involves a young, upcoming music artist, Paul Obukowho. He's 24 years old.
Okay.
And he was in Delta State. And it seems that he and a friend, Prosper Adili, who is 19, were arrested by the Rapid Response Squad, that's the RRS,
Great.
on Wednesday. And this took place along Redeemed Road, Octanam Road. And what's really concerning here is that they were arrested without any stated crime.
That's right. That's the information we have. No crime seems to have been indicated at the time of their arrest.
Right. So from there, the situation escalated pretty tragically. After a search of them yielded nothing incriminating, Prosper was detained.
Yep.
And when Paul went to inquire about Prosper, Paul was also detained.
Makes sense.
So then we have these reports that while Paul was in custody, he was handcuffed and he was subjected to torture. He then collapsed on Thursday night. And he was taken first to a police clinic, then to a specialist hospital. And he died early Saturday morning at FMC Asaba.
Oh, wow.
And adding to this, there are allegations that the RRS officers actually abandoned Paul's body at the hospital.
That's really troubling.
And the Delta State Police Public Relations Officer has not responded to any inquiries about these events.
Really concerning lack of transparency there.
So this is not an isolated incident. We have another incident of death in police custody. This involves Mrs. Uju Ezeobi in Anambra State.
Okay.
And she had previously reported a multi-million Naira land fraud involving another woman, Mrs. Mikiruka Duru.
Okay.
And she died, allegedly, in custody at Zone 13 Police Headquarters in Upo.
I see. And what was the nature of this land fraud that she was reporting?
So the allegation is that it goes back to 2021. Mrs. Ezeobi was facilitating land purchases worth over 200 million Naira
Wow.
from Mrs. Duru's organization called the United Business Women Association.
Okay.
And it seems that these funds were then diverted by Mrs. Duru.
I see. So Mrs. Ezeobi was essentially caught in the middle of this.
Right. And it seems that she ended up petitioning the Inspector General of Police because her lawyers alleged that she was facing inhumane treatment by officers who they believe were collaborating with Mrs. Duru.
So it sounds like she was facing repercussions for trying to expose this alleged fraud.
Yeah, exactly. And, the case was initially being handled by the DIG FCII in Abuja, and charges were filed against Mrs. Duru.
Okay.
But then it seems that Mrs. Duru used her influence to have the case reassigned to Zone 13.
Oh, so she was able to manipulate the legal process to her advantage.
Right, and then Mrs. Ezeobi was arrested in Asaba on March 24th by a team led by SP Utasi, and she was detained, reportedly without even a summons.
Wow, that's very concerning.
And then videos and pictures of her detention started circulating on social media, allegedly linked to Mrs. Duru.
That suggests a real intent to humiliate and intimidate her.
And then her lawyers also claim that the police at Zone 13 were essentially allowing Mrs. Duru to dictate the proceedings, which they say violated an IGP directive.
Really undermines any sense of fairness in the justice system.
Right, and on top of that, they're saying that trumped-up charges were concocted against Mrs. Ezeobi just to keep her detained and to prevent the case file from being transferred back to the DIG FCII.
So it sounds like a blatant attempt to obstruct justice.
It really does.
Yeah.
Okay, so moving on, we also have some reports of alleged labor rights abuses.
Okay.
This time we're looking at Bloom's Microfinance Bank, which is a Chinese-owned firm in Lagos.
Right.
And the main issue here is that, according to reports, the bank prioritizes the Chinese calendar over the Nigerian calendar when it comes to work schedules and holidays.
Interesting. That could create some significant conflicts for the Nigerian employees.
Right, and it goes beyond that. There are actually accusations of forced labor.
Forced labor. That's a very serious allegation. What specifically are they alleging?
So it seems that employees have been fired for not showing up to work on Nigerian public holidays.
I see. So they're being penalized for observing their own country's holidays?
Right, and it seems like working on weekends is a routine requirement for them.
That definitely goes against standard labor practices in Nigeria.
And the tension around this really seems to have come to a head with the upcoming Salah holiday.
Oh, okay.
Because it seems that the break for that was canceled via email.
Wow.
And the indication is that in the future, Work schedules will be determined based on individual performance metrics.
So they're basically saying, if you don't perform well, you might not get any breaks.
It seems that way. So there's a plan for a petition to address these alleged abuses.
That makes sense. They need to make their voices heard.
Right, and this petition is really intended to highlight these violations of workers' rights and also this alleged disregard for Nigerian work ethics, including what they describe as really restrictive leave conditions.
And it's important to remember that forced labor is explicitly prohibited under Nigerian law, both through Section 374 of the Penal Code and the Trafficking in Persons Act of 2015.
Yeah, absolutely. So we reached out to Bloom's Microfinance Bank for a response, and they said that they wouldn't comment unless they received a formal written inquiry.
That's a pretty standard response, but it doesn't really address the seriousness of the accusations being made.
No, it doesn't. Okay, so let's move on now to some political news. There's a move to recall a senator.
Oh, really? Which senator is this?
This is Senator Naira Emaswin, who represents the Labor Party in the Edo South Senatorial District.
I see. And what are the reasons behind this recall effort?
Well, the constituents have issued a 14-day notice as part of this process.
Okay.
And they're alleging failure in his duties, corruption, abuse of office, and betrayal of public trust.
Those are pretty serious allegations. It sounds like there is a significant level of dissatisfaction among his constituents.
Yeah, it really does seem that way. And, Senator Emaswin, he chairs the Senate Committee on Ethics, Code of Conduct, and Public Petitions.
Right, I remember him. He was involved in that controversy surrounding Senator Natasha Akpabio-Uduaghan's petition against Senate President Godswill Akpabio.
Exactly. And that seems to be one of the things that the constituents are unhappy about. They say he's been too silent in the Senate.
So they're accusing him of not being an effective representative for them.
Right, and they're also saying that he hasn't delivered any constituency projects that would benefit the people he represents.
I see. So they're not seeing any tangible results from his time in office.
No, they're not. And on top of all of that, they're calling for his prosecution over allegations that he was disbarred by the New York State Supreme Court back in 2010.
Disbarred? What was the reason for that?
Apparently, it was due to findings of fraud and misappropriation of client funds.
Wow, that's a serious matter.
And this issue of the alleged disbarment is actually at the center of another legal challenge. Senator Akpabio-Uduaghan has filed a petition with the Legal Practitioners Disciplinary Committee seeking to have Senator Emaswin disbarred from the Nigerian bar.
So she's arguing that he shouldn't be allowed to practice law in Nigeria because of what happened in New York.
Right, she's alleging that he failed to disclose this disbarment to INSC before running for office.
That could definitely have implications for his eligibility to hold office.
And it's interesting. Senator Akpabio-Uduaghan herself is currently suspended from the Senate. And she claims that this suspension was orchestrated by Senator Emaswin, despite a court order suggesting otherwise.
So there's a lot of political maneuvering and legal wrangling going on here.
It's a pretty tangled web.
Yeah.
Okay, let's shift gears now and look at some international news. We'll start with Ukraine. There have been some developments there amidst the ongoing diplomatic efforts to reach a peace agreement.
Right. Unfortunately, the situation on the ground remains quite tense.
Yeah, Russia has launched a really large-scale drone attack on Ukraine.
Oh, that's not good. How many drones are we talking about?
Over 170, according to the reports. And that includes more than 100 Shaheds.
Wow, that's a huge number. What were the targets of this attack?
Well, they seem to have targeted various regions, including Dnipro, Kiev, Sumy, Kharkiv, and Khmelnytskyi.
And what about casualties? Are there any reports of damage or injuries?
Tragically, yes. There are reports of 4 people being killed and another 21 injured.
Ah, that's awful.
In Dnipro, they hit some residential buildings, a hotel-restaurant complex, garages, and a car repair shop.
So it seems they're still targeting civilian infrastructure.
Yes, and President Zelensky has issued a statement accusing Russia of mocking international peace efforts with this attack.
That's understandable. It's difficult to see how they can claim to be interested in peace while carrying out these kinds of attacks.
Right, and this comes just days after Russia condemned the potential deployment of Western peacekeepers to Ukraine. They even warned of a possible clash with NATO forces.
So it seems like they're trying to escalate the situation despite the diplomatic efforts.
Yeah, it's a very worrying development.
Yeah.
But there are some positive developments on the diplomatic front. France recently hosted a summit aimed at bolstering international support for Ukraine.
Okay, that's good to hear. What came out of this summit?
Well, it brought together leaders from nearly 30 countries, plus officials from NATO and the European Union.
So, a pretty high-level gathering.
Yeah, The main focus was on securing long-term support for Ukraine. And they also discussed the possibility of deploying European troops as part of a future peace agreement. They're calling it a coalition of the willing.
That could be a significant development. It shows that there's still a strong international commitment to supporting Ukraine.
Okay, so let's move on now to some news from Guinea. The junta leader there has pardoned former dictator Moussa Dadis Camara.
Dadis Camara, that's the guy who was sentenced to 20 years in prison for his role in the 2009 massacre, right?
Exactly. He was found guilty of crimes against humanity.
And now they're pardoning him? That's going to be controversial.
Yeah, they're citing health reasons for the pardon.
But it's hard not to see this as a politically motivated decision.
Especially considering that this comes shortly after the junta announced that they would be covering the costs of compensation for the victims of the massacre.
It seems like they're trying to appease the victims while also rehabilitating the image of a convicted war criminal.
And all of this is happening against a backdrop of severe restrictions on freedoms in Guinea under the junta's rule.
So it's a very complex and concerning situation.
Okay, now let's move on to an update on the earthquake in Myanmar.
Oh, right, the one that hit a few days ago. I remember seeing some initial reports, but I haven't heard much since then.
Yeah, well, sadly, the death toll has now risen above 1,000. And there are over 2,300 people injured, with hundreds still missing.
Wow, that's a huge jump in the number of casualties.
It was a really powerful earthquake, magnitude 7.7.
And where exactly did it hit?
Central Myanmar. The tremors were felt as far away as China and Thailand.
That's a pretty wide area.
Yeah, and the damage has been described as enormous, especially in Mandalay.
Mandalay, that's one of Myanmar's largest cities.
There are also reports of buckled roads in Naypyidaw, the capital. And in Bangkok, Thailand, an unfinished building collapsed, leaving over 80 construction workers missing.
Oh, that's terrible.
And, Myanmar has been in a state of political turmoil since the military coup in 2021, so that's definitely adding to the challenges of responding to this disaster.
Yeah, the junta's control over the media and the internet makes it very difficult to get accurate information about what's happening.
Okay, let's end on a slightly more positive note. There's been some good news regarding international cooperation on wildlife protection.
Okay, tell me more.
Nigeria and Turkey are working together to ensure the safe return of a baby gorilla that was intercepted at Istanbul airport back in December.
A baby gorilla? What was it doing at the airport?
It was being smuggled out of Nigeria. Its final destination was believed to be Bangkok, Thailand.
So, someone was trying to traffic this endangered animal.
That's right, and trafficking endangered species is a violation of both Nigerian and international law.
Yeah, especially a gorilla. They're critically endangered, which means any commercial trade in them is strictly prohibited.
The good news is that Nigerian law enforcement agencies are investigating to try and identify those responsible.
Good. They need to be held accountable.
And the federal government has pledged to enhance surveillance at the borders to prevent future incidents.
Hopefully, this will deter others from trying to smuggle endangered animals.
Okay, so for our final story today, we're going back to Nigeria. And this one focuses on some really concerning conditions at a primary school.
Okay, what's happening there?
This is at the LGEA primary school in Idiliko Adom Otukpa in Benue State.
Okay.
And the reports describe a really disheartening learning environment. Pupils are sitting on the bare floor because there aren't enough desks and chairs. Teachers are having to use windowsills as chairs.
That's terrible. It's hard to imagine trying to learn or teach in those conditions.
And it gets worse. 336 pupils have reportedly stopped attending the school because the classrooms are damaged and unsafe.
Wow, that's a huge number of children missing out on their education.
And this is happening despite the fact that Benue State's education budget has seen a significant increase. It's gone from over 33 billion Naira in 2024 to over 82 billion Naira in 2025.
So where is all that money going if these children are being forced to learn in such appalling conditions?
That's the question a lot of people are asking. A civic platform called Moneting is calling for urgent government intervention. They're appealing to Governor Hyacinth Elia to take action and prioritize the needs of rural schools.
It sounds like there's a serious disconnect between the government's stated commitment to education and the reality on the ground.
Absolutely. Okay, those are some of the top news headlines for March 29th.
Some very important and concerning stories there.
As always, we at IAMC Radio and Podcast remain committed to exploring these issues with a focus on truth and justice.
And by shining a light on these stories, we hope to raise awareness and encourage positive change.
Thank you for listening to today's top news headlines on IAMC Radio and Podcast.